All right, so we're live. I'm here with my guest, John. I'm going to have John introduce himself and then we're going to get into it. So, John, the floor is yours, man. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. John Patrick, obviously. Currently, I'm the department chair for physical education and one of the strength coaches at George Walton Academy in Monroe, Georgia, a small private A school down there. Originally from Youngstown, Ohio. Very proud to be from Youngstown, Ohio. Um, and pretty much got my start coaching there. I played collegiate athletics there and then got my coaching with Dick Hartzell, the individual that made the big rubber bands. That was back in 98, 99, so a long time ago. Actually the bands just started getting into baseball with the Indians and some of the other sport organizations. That actually led me to work in the minor leagues just for the fact that they were looking for somebody, the stretching routine and the ankle routine that Dick Hartzell invented. A lot of the ball clubs were experimenting with that, so that kind of led me into baseball. I worked in baseball for 2 years. Um, 1 year for rookie ball down in Lakeland with the Tigers, and then another year in extended spring with the Indians before they moved out to Arizona or whatnot. So enjoyed it. Moved into collegiate athletics after that. Been in collegiate athletics uh, pretty much since that period of time. I had a couple hiatuses where I did some private sector stuff, but for the most part, try to stay in collegiate athletics. And then just recently, June of 2021, uh, came to George Walton Academy, and I've been here for this is going to my pretty much third year here pretty soon. So it's been a journey.
I'm super excited to have you on, man. Obviously, you've hinted at it. You've got some pro experience, college,
Right.
high school. You said back in the 90s you were training. So you've been at it for over 20 years, which maybe to you doesn't seem that long, or you look back on it and you're like, wow, where did the time go? But for me, it's an honor to be able to speak with you and to learn from you and to kind of bounce around all of those different areas that you've been in. And so let's talk about that. Training athletes in the pro setting, training athletes in the college setting, the high school setting, and maybe how you've seen training progress over time or not progress. They say
100%.
everything that's new is old, or whatever the saying is. Like, everything kind of comes back around. Like, what has kind of come in and out, and what do you like? What do you keep not like? So let's just dive into it.
Pro training. I mean, had experience working in the minor league baseball system for a period of time. I helped with OTAs in the NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars from '04 to '08. And I've worked obviously with some professional athletes in the private sector, and then and obviously maybe some prep guys, the college guys that graduated and want to further their career, right? So just recently, when I was at any university, there's always a kid that wants to go pro or gets drafted or something like that. So um, initially training, back in the back in I guess in the 2000s when I got into um, the minor league system. I mean, it was baseball, right? It was taboo. Guys aren't supposed to lift weights. Don't train heavy. In two very different systems. When I was with the Tigers and the Indians, Tigers were very machine based. Not to say high intensity, but more for, I would say, aesthetics. We did a lot of speed training, a lot of conditioning, but there was never seemed to be a method explained. We did a lot of static stretching back then. We obviously implemented a lot of band stuff since that's how I got my first initial aspect, and that just came with mobility stuff, flexibility, even flossing back then. Kelly started the whole flossing thing. I don't might have been 2010 or something like that. So we did some compression work, and it was all there was no studies, there was nothing going on, but it was something that we implemented, right? And that's something just from a holistic standpoint was good, but methodology wise, it was different than what I was used to, going through, athletics in college and in high school. And then with the Indians were very barbell, free weight barbell based, dumbbell based. Um, you know, big on. They weren't really doing. They didn't want to go really really heavy, but there's more linear progressive through there, and more hands on with the athletes as far as developmental goes. It seemed like you know the Tigers were kind of like, hey, it's kind of like everybody's doing very similar things, where the Indians kind of make things individualized a little bit. And we were, obviously we had some say since I was, an assistant, but for most part, a lot of those individuals, the head coordinator dictated everything and then pretty much gave you what you needed. You just had to find locations to train on the road and stuff like that. Where pretty much every ballpark now has some type of facility, um, or whatnot. With when I helped out with the Jaguars, I got a true perspective of what high intensity training was, machine based high intensity. That's when Mark Asanovich was there. Mark Asanovich was, he's pretty much a true high intensity individual. Didn't do Olympic lifts, and I was really big into Olympic lifts, especially at my first collegiate stop, just because that was my background. That's what I learned when I was a graduate student and a GA is Olympic based movements and stuff. So it gave me a different view as far as how to train athletes, as far as high intensity, whether it's one set or two sets of failure, a lot of manual resistance work, neck work as far as manual resistance was huge, and a lot of grip work. So, it was really great to see because it took individuals from so many different areas, so many different college programs, and it kind of simplified their training so that they were, on the specific path. So, at that time, he only had a staff of two individuals, so it was him and his assistant, and then he had interns after that. And we kind of came in and volunteered and interned during our morning hours. We're now staffs nowadays are, I have a head guy, an assistant, the director of sports science, and then some assistants after that. So it's a lot different realm. Back then, it just seemed like you had to do a lot more with a lot less, if that made sense. So, but that was really true. That was pretty intriguing to me just because, he knew my philosophy and he knew I was Olympic lift and we knew that he was totally against them, but he never tried to sway me or anything like that. He pretty much, we would go through and we would take an athlete through the line. Like he would have a pre-exhaust. He pretty much had three lines. So, it was a pre-exhaust push-pull movement and then, or a push-pull movement line and then a pre-exhaust line and they had like a lower body line. And so whatever the athlete had for the day, you would just take them through that and their weights was on there. You'd load the weight up. They would try to get the weight, the number of reps they needed for that day. And then they'd get themselves about a minute 30 rest and they'd go right to the next machine. So, the whole workout might've took 35, 40 minutes. But I mean, by the time guys were done, it's all they needed for muscle growth and for hypertrophy and from an injury standpoint. And there were some other programs doing similar things back then, like the Ravens, the Redskins. I think the Bengals had very similar philosophies. So it was it was a lot more common. Even colleges was a lot more common back then too. So, but eventually, these individuals kind of hybrided. I think it changed from a football perspective, I think it changed with a lot of coaching aspects, right? Like what your coach did in their college years or whatnot. I think that kind of molded what we had to do as our profession, because obviously, even though we're the professionals, sometimes the head coach may dictate some things as far as what he wants in a program or she wants in the program. So I think that's why it's kind of evolved now. And a lot of those college programs do some type of triple extension Olympic based movement now or variations, right? You don't see a lot of high intensity aspects anymore unless it's some type of return to play protocol and you're building some type of hypertrophy. But that was really intriguing to me. That kind of modified my philosophy a little bit as far as, putting size on individuals, working to failure, using machines that normally, it was like taboo. What are you using a machine for, right? But also, I mean, depending on what circumstances you were and what university or what facility you had, that kind of dictates your program too, right? So if you walk in, you have a bunch of Olympic bumpers on the Olympic platforms, then you might want to think about doing some Olympic lifts because no one's going to come and change your room out for you or give you a huge donation, right? But if it's something that you have, pretty much a room full of machines, then you have to dictate that philosophy. So, but the X's and O's of programming is the easy part. I think the hardest part is just connecting with those athletes and really getting them to understand, the process that it takes, because everybody wants to go to 0 to 60 as fast as they can, right? So especially at the collegiate level, high school level, even more, right? So it's really understanding having your philosophy in place, having those methods to reach the end goal, but then also really having the understanding of what the structure of your program is, and how you go through it. I think that was the biggest thing has changed for me, going from professional to collegiate to now to the high school level is it really challenged not necessarily my ability to program, but really structure things for the different, I guess, training ages that you run into, right? Because you automatically assume at college you get kids and they can automatically run, they can automatically do some knee bend movements. At the high school level, I mean, you're working with coordination aspects. You're working with kids that can't really walk and chew gum at the same time, and their focus isn't there. So you kind of have to dumb it down a little bit to really get everybody on the same page, right? So, because a lot, just like I said a little bit earlier, a lot of kids who work at the high school level aren't going to go pro. So, it's something that, or aren't good, maybe not even going to play collegiate athletics. So, what is the interest in them to train hard and try to push themselves to get better, right? So,
Yeah, that's something that's always been interesting to me is obviously being at the highest level of professional baseball and seeing kids at the high school level. And I had done some private facility stuff earlier in my career. And it was like, well, how do the pros train? How do the pro? I want to train like the pros. And I'm like, but you're not a pro, like there are definitely things that are similar and you can do, and there's probably movement capabilities that you need to have. But I think, like you said, especially with the high school kids, it's like some of them aren't coordinated enough to like bend over and tie their shoe without tripping on themselves. And either they or their parents expect, hey, I need this kid to train like, you know, player X in the big leagues. And I'm like, that's not player X in the big leagues. I've seen that guy do some crazy things. Like, I don't think your child is ready for that. Have you kind of seen that yourself, kind of just through those different layers?
no, 100%. I mean, that's a big thing. Like, the collegiate level, we kind of progress things off playing time, right? Like how many plays the guy individual was playing, or what their role was on the team. At the high school level, we've broken it down even more into simplistic, training ages. So we have the way we do things is we kind of have goals, as far as each level, as far as kids that need to hit. So, every 4 weeks, a kid may be on a certain lift through our progression regression, and then we have something based on their body weight they have to hit. Like as far as, our first progression, let's say from a novice is they're gonna try to do a body weight squat, but then we don't have enough dumbbells. We didn't at the time have enough dumbbells to do goblet squats. We did anterior load goblet. So they had to do a number of repetitions based off their body weight, with a certain weight, and they had to hit that. And if they hit that, then they move the goblet, and then goblet they move the front they move the back, and then back they move into more aggressive variations, whether it's velocity base or whether it's a box squat or whether it's some type of variation of a bar, right? So, a lot of that stuff isn't needed at those higher level ends because we don't have kids that really reach that end. But that's how we pretty much develop that, right? So that way it always keeps a kid kind of intrigued to get to the next level. Um, and that's something that we've had success with, just for the fact that, if we evaluate and go through an assessment, okay, hey, you're going to be starting at the novice level because maybe you're a freshman or maybe you're just somebody that just hasn't trained before. Well, within 4 weeks, if you hit this certain goal, now we can move up to the next stage. So it gives these kids an incentive, right? Because everybody wants to move up to the next level. So that's been a positive thing. Now the individuals that aren't motivated or just are comfortable being where they're at, then they'll just stay at that exercise. It becomes easy for us to program it because we don't have to change anything or do anything different. So, the kids kind of weed themselves out a little bit as far as that goes, which is nice. But we run everything in a structured environment, so we do everything on a time system. So if we might have one kid that's goblet squatting, one kid that's front squatting, one kid that's back squatting on different racks, and they're paired up similar with other kids in the same training age, but we're doing everything at the same tempo at the same time. That way, nobody slips through the cracks or anything like that, right? So, it works out really, really well for us. Some other individuals may not be able to do something like that because their facility size, or maybe the coaches or the AD want something different. And that goes across the board at every level of athletics, right? Like that's what coaches or administration tries to find. They try to find a good fit, of what they want. And then sometimes those coaches, sign off on it, and that's how you get a job, right? So, but I think the biggest thing we have found is kids want to progress too quickly, and we kind of have to back it off a little bit just for the fact that they're just structurally just not strong enough to handle certain things. I'm very big on uh, like accommodating resistance and stuff like that, for like my collegiate training. High school training, I mean, it's a totally different ball game just for the fact that a lot of these kids haven't reached their full potential, or from a maturation standpoint, but also from the aspect of just a structural standpoint, right? They don't have the muscle mass to hold a barbell on their back from upper back strength. So how do we build that so they can do that? Is there a variation that we do that? We didn't have safety squat bars until recently, so a lot of the things would be anterior loaded, and now we have the aspect of using a safety squat bar if we want to, whether it's you know posterior loaded or anterior loaded. So we have some different variations now, just because we've had to, we've had some very grateful boosters come in and help us out financially. So it's helped us out quite a bit, and that's even added more variation to how we train, and allows us to do different things if we need to. So, there's nothing we don't hold back from as far as from a technological standpoint. Like we use Team Builder. We're in the process of getting VBT. We have force plates if we need to. But sometimes there's no real reasoning to even use that on the kids that we have, just for the fact that they're not that level yet. You see a lot of high schools using, GPS systems and stuff like that, but a lot of these kids have no idea how to strain. So using those systems to dictate player load is almost non-significant, just because their ceiling has just not been tapped to that level yet, compared to some other high level athletes, right?
Yeah, there's two aspects of that that I wanted to get into. I'm kind of like keeping my little notes here. Is like
That's fine.
the first one is in regards to the kids that you're training specifically, are they only high school athletes, or is it all the high school kids have access to the weight room for you?
So for us, we hold classes throughout the day, first period to seventh period, um, and it's an elective. So kids get to sign up, they get school credit. We've assigned different names, different classes, so that way on a college transcript it looks different. If a kid's taken the class 3 years in a row, he can have three different names on the college transcript for an elective, so it looks different. So it's just not weight training, weight training, weight training, right? So that's not appealing, because first off, I think I don't know how a lot of other private schools are, but we have 100% of our kids get accepted into college. Whether they go to college or not is totally up to them. But that's our goal for them to graduate. They have to get it accepted into college, right? So it's important to us that the application process and their transcript is fluid in the classes that they need. So we try to work a lot to try to get kids in there. But they're also dealing with AP classes. They're dealing with other things too that we try to work out. So not only do we have class times during our class periods, but if we have study halls, right? So if a kid has a certain GPA, a good GPA, we can pull him out of study hall instead of taking the class. Now, if they're an athlete and they have like an 85% and above in the class, now they can leave study hall to come train. If that makes sense. So that's one way we've kind of got more kids into our facility and train them like that. But for the most part, anybody can take it. That's why we've kind of come up with this training system. So, if we have the ninth grade golfer and the 12th grade, middle linebacker who's, all 2-year all conference training in the same class, then we can dictate programming based off that, if that makes sense. So we go through a basic assessment program. We initially did an FMS with every athlete just to see, or every student just to see, just to describe to them and show to them their deficiencies. A lot of kids enjoyed that. A lot of kids didn't, because a lot of kids don't like being told that they have a problematic area, right? So we've kind of just assessed it now to a couple movements, and we can automatically dictate where they're starting from and where they need to be at, because our programs have already been, we started off initially at like a novice program. Our first year was a novice program and intermediate program. And then the next year we moved up to a novice 1, novice 2, intermediate 1, an intermediate 2. And now we're up to, novice 1, novice 2, intermediate 1, intermediate 2, advanced, and then eventually with technology and stuff like that and more tools and toys that we get, we can move into an advanced 2, if that makes sense. So and that's how we structure everything. We don't do anything based off sport. Some of our coaches didn't understand that, but we are 100% movement based. And as we progress through pretty much every workout is very similar, especially at that level as far as high school goes. Is you really don't need a high level of specificity, even though the parents think that and the coaches think that. That's why so many people in the private sector, with travel ball and everything else, are making quite a bit of money. But then also kids are getting burnt out and overtrained and whatnot. So we try to keep it is simplistic as possible, and we don't really fall into that sport specific range, if that makes sense. We just say that it's movement specific. Every program is going to make you more athletic. It reached the variables and the training variables and the testing variables, the KPIs that we need, that we test on a daily basis. And then from there, it's going to get them set up. So if they do want to play at the next level, they're going to be moving efficiently and they're going to be able to understand what the exercises are. So you know, even with the kids that don't go on the collegiate level, we want them to go, if they go to college, we want them to go in the community rec center and be able to perform a workout or compete, do a workout without having to, personally pay somebody to train them, if that makes sense. And they feel confident enough to do so. So, as far as technique goes and stuff like that, we're telling them coaching cues. We may set up a TV that has the coaching cues on there. So, hey, during this lift, these are the coaching cues. This is what you need to look out for. This is what we need to hear. You know what I'm saying? So while they're going through that timing system, hey, the first 5 minutes, we're going through our block A1 and block A2, which may be main movement warm up and some type of plyometric. We want to hear them coaching each other up and like a peer interaction. That way, us as coaches can sit back, we can visually watch who may need help or more assistance. But each one of those kids is their own individual group coach, and they're paired up with people that they can. And plus, it gets them to talk, right? They're not on their phones. They're not, if they're working with somebody they don't know, it kind of builds that relationship a little bit. And we call it a school building relationship, right? So we may have a football player, a basketball player, and I don't know, a tennis player training on the same rack because they're at the same training age, right? Well, those football players may never go to a tennis match, and those tennis players may never go to a basketball. But since they are introduced to those individuals and they're trained with those individuals, they kind of get bought in. And now all of a sudden, you have more kids attempting to make more of an effort to go see their friend that they train with at their competition, right? So it's not as cliquey. It's not, you'll have, if you go to collegiate level, you always have, all the Olympic sports, complaining because the football players get everything and everything like that. It becomes kind of a battle, right? Where we wanted to eliminate that as much as possible. And I think we have done that. And some of our other sports besides football have had success. So, and plus we get good crowds. We're a very small, tight knit community. Our high school only has roughly 300 kids in it. So we need as many kids as possible. Now we do have, our whole school goes K through 12. And there's about 1,000, a little over 1,000 in the entire school. But the thing is when you go to a sporting event, the whole community's there. So the more people we have, interacting and stuff like that, the more of a, I hate to use the word family atmosphere, but the more that we have that incorporated in our training, the more carryover I think we have. So a very different environment than some. I know a lot of coaches that are just training teams, right? They might train teams before school, after school, or maybe their block is just football. But that's just something that, it may be something that we move to that later on. But right now, with what we have is what we've come up with. And so far, it's been, I think it's been successful. So.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. That's kind of the point I was making earlier is like a lot of the people I see in private settings are training like baseball specific players, and they're like 10, 11, 12 years old, and those kids like burn out. Some of them don't go to college, most of them don't go pro, and it's almost like I'd rather see them just train for good movement competency and like weight room literacy. And I think some of the other skills that you're talking about, like communicating with other people, making sure they graduate, if they want to live a healthier life through fitness and strength training, they can. And I think the other thing too is like when you're a high school kid, the fact that you're intermingling teams, like that, the tennis and the football players may never connect,
Right.
but when they are, that tennis player might want to go play football, or that football player might want to go play tennis. When I was in high school, I played hockey and baseball. And my senior year, I played soccer because one of the baseball coaches was a coach on the team, and all my best friends played soccer. So I was like, well, I want to play with my friends. I want to play some sport I never tried. The coach is there. I'm familiar with him. And all of a sudden, I was a soccer player. So it was like, I was doing just normal workouts that translated to me being a good baseball player, a good hockey player, and I ended up being a decent soccer player. I only played 1 year, but it was because I was just good at moving, and it wasn't specifically, oh, I was only training for baseball and I was committing to that, and it wasn't like that, you know what I mean? So for me to hear that is really encouraging. And then the other part that I was thinking about is the technology aspect and the point you make of like seeing some schools using like GPS or VBT or force plates. And it's almost like, if you have open gym classes, even if there's somebody who's like really interested in playing the violin, they don't want to play sports, but they want to learn the weight room for life skills and like we said earlier, like good, just healthy habits. Like, I don't think they're going to care about putting a GPS unit on, you know what I mean? Or velocity based training. But if you teach them how to squat properly, how to bench, row, pull, like all of those things will help them like just be healthier moving forward. Because the reality is most people are not going pro, right? They're not going pro in athletics. But if we can help them with longevity of life and healthy lifestyles, and also those other skills, like you said, the communication aspects, the teamwork aspects, that I don't like the word either, but quote unquote the family aspect, like just the sense of community and belonging. I think that goes way further for 99.99999% of high school kids. And then every once in a while, one of those kids may go play at a high college level, but when they get there, that for me, that coach doesn't have to worry about, how they move, right? I did an internship at TCU down in Texas. We worked with a bunch of the freshmen, and they all were absolute beasts because in high school they learned how to squat properly, how to bench properly, how to pull properly, how to run, how to condition, how to strain. So when they were there, we almost had to like pull the reins back on them because they were all beasts as freshmen already, but they had learned all of those skills in high school and had played football. Like, so for me, I look at the high school setting. I know there's a lot of people that say it's like untapped. We need professionals there. Like, I agree. It's just like the problem is somebody like myself, not necessarily myself, but somebody like in my shoes, quote unquote, of being in the pro setting, or somebody like yourself being in the collegiate setting. If you go to that high school setting and you try to take some of those principles, I think you're setting those kids up for failure and you're setting yourself up for failure instead of meeting the kids where they're at and preparing them for the next step instead of treating it like, this is the pros. These kids have to do, these crazy drills. And it's like, you could probably still get a lot of development out of them without all of that technology and all of that other stuff. And that was where I was going to go, is like, how has the technology progressed over time in the course of your career? And like now that we're in this like crazy tech age where everything has to be on force plates, everything has to be velocity based training, auto regulation, this, that, and the other thing. Like, how do you sift through that when like a parent or a kid comes to you and is like, I need to do this because I saw, I don't know, somebody
Right.
in the pros doing this. You know what I mean? Like, how do you have those conversations with those kids?
Yeah, I mean everybody looks at social media. I think social media is amazing. I also think it's a hindrance, right? Depending on where you get your information from. But
Agreed. Yes.
I worked in the private sector for about a year, right? I was a general manager at a facility in Jacksonville, Florida. My job was pretty much designing the programs. I did some instructional floor instruction, but I designed programs for every client that we had, right? So the big thing was, you know, just like you said, sports specificity was huge, right? So baseball kid came in, he wants to do this, he wants to do that. And we had amazing toys, right? So we had Kaiser machines, we had 1080 Sprint, we had things that a lot of private sectors at the time didn't have. Um, and we had a lot of athletes too that came through our doors. And the biggest thing is trying to speak with those parents, is really trying to educate them on what they're going to run into as far as their kids at the next level. So, I think there's a couple of high schools in Jacksonville that we kind of got some kids. We had a competition among local schools, like a 7-on-7 competition, and whoever won, we would give them free admission to our facility. So it was kind of like a free marketing campaign, right? But those kids, we came in and it was just a high environment. So sometimes that technology isn't needed because the competition, right? So if it's something like VBT and you're using it for intent, which a lot of people do, right, just to measure bar speed and stuff like that, and they say it adds competition with the group. Well, if you get a lot of high level individuals, they're going to have competition no matter what, depending on what's going on. So, um, some conversations I've had is, I think it's great as far as really showing that your program's going well. I don't think that you need to use it that you need to design your program to get better info in the technology, if that makes sense. So, if you're using it every so often to dictate the program that you do as far as seeing the results, then that's fantastic. But if you're just designing your programs or basing all your programs based off the results that you see, which happens a lot, that's an issue. So, I've never run into a situation where parents are like, "Hey, I really need this technology." We kind of, some at the facility that I was at, parents weren't even allowed in the facility. We had a room with a TV and cameras, so they would actually watch their kids train while our trainers actually took them through things. So, some parents complained about it, but if you have a high level of competition, a lot of kids that are going to the collegiate level, and you're producing results, then parents aren't going to say anything. So, but at the high school level we're at now, obviously we have timing gates. We have Dasher. We have some very simplistic like skills timing systems that we've compared against Brower, and it's very similar. But we use that for a lot of our straight ahead stuff. And then when Dasher comes, like if we're doing like some type of summer combine or something like that, we need something more professional. Then we'll pull out the Dasher unit and use that. But just to set it up to run, flying tens or 5 yard starts or something like that is not necessarily a means for us. We just use our regular timing system. We have two plyo mats that we do different jumps off of, which helps us during our plyometric. We try to test everything weekly, depending on where we're at. Like we'll alternate plyos, we'll alternate different sprint concepts. VBT wise, depending on what zone we're in, for our very high level individuals, we'll switch that up if we're training, absolute or speed strength or strength speed, depending on where we're at. But for the most part, those are the units we're using. Like we're trying to get some of our academia to, we have force plates, and we want our academia to run some labs that we could use our kids as test subjects. But if it's not something that the teacher wants to do, then it is what it is, right? So we have that stuff, but we just haven't used it to really found a need to really use it. I mean, all of our kids are improving. I think the biggest thing with the plyo mats and some of our sprint stuff is I think the most important thing that we have as far as from a technology standpoint is an athlete management system. So just to put all our information in, whether you want to use Excel or another company, there's a lot of companies out there. We have an Excel one, but obviously we're looking at another company to mass produce our stuff and get it out even easier, so our Excel doesn't get jammed up with all the info, right? So that's our biggest thing, because we can project that around the TV, and if we're doing plyo mat, counter movement jump, for maximal height, then we can pretty much have it right there and just punch it in when kids get different numbers, and you can see that it changed daily, right? So we kind of have like a all-time list, and we have a daily list, so kids from each class can kind of beat their old numbers, but then also be number one in the class. So that's huge. That's really helped us out quite a bit. And then, with that management system, we eventually want to go and be able to do send progress reports to the parents if they need them, right? So I know there's a couple systems out there that do that already, but we're just trying to find that fits into our budget, and then also that works wonders, right? So I think that's huge. I try to, I do a lot of emails and stuff to parents and go, we have athlete of the month. So I try to send that out, and they get a T-shirt and all that good stuff. Take your picture. So you kind of have to give those kids props, because then all of a sudden, well, why'd so and so get a T-shirt? Well, he had perfect attendance. He had this many PRs. They're at this level, and the other kid's like, well, I want to do that. Well, this is the standard. Reach up to. So having those things to strive for is huge. At the collegiate level, I ran into some of those things, but everybody at the collegiate level has to perform at a high level. And if you don't perform at a high level, they're going to recruit somebody that comes in that's going to pretty much replace you, right? So at the high school level, we don't have that option. We may, some private schools get some kids here and there, that may want to come to your school because you have athletic success. But for the most part, we're not out there recruiting kids. We're stuck with the kids that we have. Not that they're bad or good, but we have to develop them as much as possible to be successful. So those pieces of technology that I mentioned are probably the most useful to us. We're looking at some other ones, right here. I don't not want to like drop product names or anything, but like just, things that help us up with the assessments, things that help us just collecting all the data. Because there's two individuals, me and another individual, we came at the same time, and our philosophies. I'm older. He's straight out of college, and we kind of our philosophies actually pretty much work together simultaneously. So it's almost and it's weird because we have the same birthday, so it's almost like the same exact person, except just I'm 20 years older and he's 20 years younger. So it's pretty cool. It's the first time I've ever run into something this similar. But we have the same training philosophy. We learn off the same stuff. I try to push things to him. We had a speaking engagement at the NSCA, so I try to push him to come talk with me, or I try to give him some information on different training philosophies or styles or stuff like that, just to continue the wealth, right? But that's the same thing from a technology standpoint. Like it's all grid frog and grand, but if you're not competing at a high level or have kids that aren't competing at a high level, is it really necessary? I don't know. We do it for intent. We do it to keep competition alive because I think competition builds a lot within your program. Um, but some people may find a lot more useful than me. I just see everything on Twitter that people post, and it becomes pretty much a battle war as far as what's better than the other one, and at the end of the day, they're all it's whatever money you have, and you can repeatedly pay that money for yearly service fees. I have a budget that I'm very particular with, and I changed. My first and foremost, my facility was the most important thing, is what I needed to change, and we've done that through some boosters and some other things, and now we can move a direction as far as getting more technology in if we need to. So
Yeah, for me, the funny thing is, like, you talk about the t-shirt, and like you break a t-shirt out and it's like all
that's
hell breaks loose for
it's a
everybody.
war.
Like,
Yeah,
I want to get a t-shirt. What do I have to do? And then all of a sudden they're like uber motivated to just
right.
get, this $10 t-shirt you have. And then the other thing is, like, when I was in high school and college, obviously I never had the technology, but it was like there were two things that motivated me is like if I saw my friend outlift me, I wanted to beat him. And then the other thing was the gym that we would train at in town, our rival high school would train there also. So
Yeah,
all the kids from the other baseball team, we were all friends.
right.
But when it was training time, it was like, well, what are they doing? Like, I need to do more than them to be ready to play on the field. So, like, we didn't have the technology driving us, but the ultimate factor, right, is like the competition and the intent. And however you can drive that in your program, like, it goes so far. And it's the same, like, even in the highest levels of the pros, the guys up here are uber competitive with everything.
Right.
Anything that you're doing, like, it could be the simplest mobility drill. Be like, yeah, but I'm more mobile than him. Look at me, watch me. I'm more, and you're like, you're really like fighting over who has more hip mobility in the
Right.
basic 90-90 position. Like, yeah, watch me, watch me. Like, he can't do it. And I'm like, whatever it takes. You know what I mean? So I
And
think,
that's why they're at that level too. You know what I'm saying?
yes,
That's what has driven them, and that's what's been ingrained in their head. They have that personality to get to that level, and I mean, some people have it, and some people don't. But I'd much rather work with a person like that than somewhere you have to consistently be on them 24/7, and they have the talent. We've all run into them, right? They
yes,
have the
correct,
talent, they have the
100%.
ability, but you're just like, man, I cannot get through with that guy, or he just doesn't want to do it. So that's the toughest thing, and that's obviously building a staff is important with that, and having different staff members. But I think getting to the competition aspect, I mean, when I was in high school, and looking back on it, I mean, this is during the early '90s, just to date me a little bit, but we were doing things that you know are kind of we were doing Hatfield squats with safety squat bars. That was our only form of squatting, which that kind of have just started back up again recently, right? That's like a big trend, right? We were big trap bar deadlift individuals. Obviously we did, bench and all that stuff. But from what our coach, as far as his background, he didn't really have a training background, but back then, like he took some movements that were old school strength movements, and he wanted to get kids strong without, not necessarily movement qualities or technique qualities becoming a hindrance, and he did it the most simplistic way possible. I mean, I remember we'd have kids squatting, Hatfield, 600, 700, 800 pounds, high school kids. and all of a sudden it became, we weren't loading, fives and tens on the bar. You could only load 45s and 25s. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
um, it was just, and it might be something where we are using a little bit of arms to get it up, but that intent and that grit and that level of competition to try to beat that next guy, and it's pretty much one of the safest squatting, apparatuses you could possibly do. But for the most part, like that's the way you really got those kids to really strain, right? Which nowadays, I mean, I think kids will strain more in competition than they will more in training. Where we all know that straining during that training is really going to feed over and actually do more for what they're doing in competition, right? So it's really trying to, it seems like training nowadays is more finesse for some individuals, and well, it has to be this exercise and that exercise, and to a certain point, it does, but there's a lot of kids that just need to get strong in general, and they're going to be a lot better quality movers because of that eventually. So it just depends. You have to pick your poison and pick the right time to implement things. So
Going back to a point that you had just made, talking about like having a good staff and everything to kind of connect with those players. So the other real rabbit hole that I want to go down with you is just overseeing a department and really maximizing the hires that you have around you. You have a ton of experience as a director, and so I kind of want to just talk about that. Really, like what it's like to be, the number one, the top of the top strength coach in a department, and all the things that go into that, and like how you hire people around you to kind of make the most of what you're trying to do.
huh. No, I mean, right now looking back, I think it's good to look back just because I can see the mistakes I made at the collegiate level when I was a director and whatnot. Like I made a lot of, I guess, egotistical mistakes, right? I think right now at the high school level, I'm a, I'm better than I was, which is the way it should gradually progress. But I'm a better leader and a better mentor, a better overall director now than I than I would in the last 20 some years, right? So, but I think initially, I always thought a director when I first got out of college, I was a GA, and then I didn't really have a chance to be an assistant anywhere. I went right to being a head strength coach, which was I think is my biggest downfall, just because um, I wasn't under a coaching tree, right? Usually that assistant that you get, you're assistant underneath somebody. That's usually that first big coaching tree that you really have, right? Um, and I didn't really, I kind of dictated my own philosophy and had to educate myself on some things. Um, so that's, I became kind of like, hey, I'm the head guy. It was very egotistical, like it was my way or the highway. I was very standoffish. Um, you know, I was pretty much everything, you could think of what a strength coach would be during those times, what people kind of portray themselves at. I think that's totally evolved during the times. You can't be that way anymore. You shouldn't be that way to begin with. But, what really opened my eyes at that time, I was working at a small Division I school, um, FCS level. We had football, was non-scholarly football. We had our Olympic sports. I played football. That was my experience with football. So football's king or whatnot. But I didn't have I had 20 sports, 21 sports, and it was by myself. So I had interns that helped out, but they weren't. My first intern wasn't getting paid anything. I would take him out to lunch, once or twice a week when I could afford it because I wasn't making very much money at all. He worked the summer for me, and then he went and opened up his own business, own CrossFit business, right? Because that's what he wanted to do. And then eventually, administration saw that I needed help, so they eventually threw a little money to get more paid interns and stuff like that. But the thing is I was still getting individuals with very little experience, and I needed people that were on the floor ready right away, if that made sense, right? So, um, you know, I wasn't. I would really dictate a lot of programming initially, but so that way they knew what was going on or what they had to do structurally from a programming standpoint. And then longer they were there, I'd give them more responsibility. But initially, I pretty much my biggest thing was coaching on the floor, like how to be present, how to gain the attention of a room, how to dictate things, which I think is a lost art for some coaches. So that's my every mentor, every or when I'm a mentor to somebody or something like that, everybody goes, well, what's the biggest thing you learned? Well, I learned how I really learned how to control the room and dictate those things and control a team in general. And I told told one of our coaches at the high school level the other day, I'm like, the coach that these kids are around the most, these kids are going to want to emulate the most. So if you have it's tried and true day in, day out. They're around the strength coach the most. Pretty soon they start to have the same demeanor. Pretty soon they start having the same attitude. It's a crazy atmosphere, right? But that's something I've learned is like, well, why are these kids acting this way or that way? And I'm like, well, it's a direct reflection of me. So if we need kids to be, I I would always call out, initially when I first started coaching, I always call out the weakest link, right? Like, oh, hey, you didn't make your times, like you X, Y, and Z. You need to, you need to pick a different sport. The most idiotic things you could possibly say. And pretty soon I saw some of the other, teammates doing the similar thing, like going after the weakest link. And I'm like, that's just not. I mean, that's if I'm on the team, that's not the way I want to be treated. So it's something I started correlating over to being more positive and just picking out the individuals that did exceptional things for the day. Hey, Jimmy finished first on this, this, and this. Susie did this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden, those kids that were on the lower end saw that praise and wanted the praise and started doing, trying to compete more, right? So then it became more of a positive and fluid atmosphere. Teammates started helping out other teammates. There's tighter bonds and tighter connections on the team. And that's stuff you're not really educated on or really don't know what's going on. But, I like to control the floor and that dictates a lot as far as what you can get volume wise from training. But it also dictates, how your room's set up and stuff like that. So every place I've been, I've kind of recreated the room, which is I'm very fortunate, as far as being able to do so, having the resources to have a new budget and create a room and meet with vendors and stuff like that. I think it's an awesome experience. I love doing those things. But for the most part, I mean, building that staff, you really have to find out what their strengths are, and then put them in positions to be successful. Now you're going to have to challenge them once in a while, but the more success that those staff members can have, the more confidence grows, and then from there you can get more challenging things, right? So, I started doing like disc assessments with staff members, just trying to find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, how they grew and how they learned. There's other personality tests out there that work, but that worked for me. How to address them if they're more task oriented or if they're more free thinking. What gives them the environment to really respond. I started doing that when I took over pretty much internship roles or voluntary, internship aspects as far as educating those kids and being a mentor to them, like finding out how they learned or what prospectively made them stronger coaches, and then I'd put them in situations to try to succeed as much as possible. And then I would, hey, okay, hey, are you ready to do this today? And then I go, I'm not sure. Well, let's give it a try and see what happens, and then go from there. And kids that the kids I always worked with, the teams I always worked with, understood that too. They understood the passion that I had for the profession because I'd always, they pretty much, when I started working with less teams, obviously you become more entwined in the everyday persona of the team, right? You become more personable. They become more personable with you. You invest more of your personal time into them, and they do likewise, right? So a lot of administrators think, well, you work with less teams, you're going to have a lot more free time, and that's not the case at all. You're actually putting more time into things. Your programs are becoming more and more complicated, or you can do different tasks with them, and it may be something you're spending a lot more time at practice and seeing what the kids go through on a daily basis. So that's where I tell kids that, hey, so and so's an intern. This is what they're doing today. They're going to take you through a warm up. Let's don't give them a hard time. Let's see what happens. And they're very respectful in that manner because they understand that those individuals are trying to get to the next level of their education. Just like they at one time were trying to go from developmental to starting lineup, vice versa. These individuals are doing that too. So it's awesome that way. I love getting back to those kids and trying to mentor kids like that. But staff, I think, it always comes down to, every job I've had, it has nothing to do with my resume at all. It's just who you know, right? And it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is, and that's the process. And I wish it wasn't that way, but connection with another person is huge. If I have some connection with a person, I'm going to listen to that person first, or get an opinion off that person before somebody else. And You know, a lot of people will tell you differently, and they're probably lying to you. But that loyalty is a huge thing. So individuals that, you know, I'm big on, you know, I, you know, my first full time job was at a D1 institution was $19,000 a year, and then after 3 months, the state of Florida passed a law that if you didn't make, you know, if you worked more than 40 hours a week, you had to get overtime unless you made the salary of 23.3. So within, you know, within 3 months, I got a raise of a couple, you know, a couple $1,000, and then from there, it's extensionally grew. So I consider myself somebody that that kind of, I don't want to, I hate the word grind, but someone that does not shy away from work, no matter the hours or like I'm going to put the process in. I'm not going to complain. That's what my dad did. You know, he worked at General Motors for 27 years. He fed it. You know, he fed us. My mom didn't have to work if she didn't want to. So it's like that blue collar mentality of working and getting up and bring your lunch pail to work. And it's so cliche, but I feed off that. And that's just, you know, that's just how I am. So, and I do the same thing now, but that's something I look for people, like people that just come from a hardship or come from something difficult. You know, I want those kids to succeed more than anything. I'm not going to give it easy to them because I think, you know, you can't give anybody anything easy in life, but those are individuals I want to succeed more than anything else. And that's the thing is I try to put individuals in those hardship situations. And if you're willing to come, you know, work for free for a period of time, then I think that moving up the ladder and being internally grown within to get the next position, I think that means a lot, right? So, um, you know, I do look for qualifications, obviously, you know, educational qualifications, certification qualifications. Um, Initially, when hiring people, I started looking for people that had similar philosophies, right? But that has totally changed. You know, I want individuals that, if I hired people now, I want everybody to have a specialty. So if a guy is specific on, um, you know, maximal speed and top end speed and building acceleration, fantastic. Someone that is, you know, great with strength, building, you know, interior alignment or, you know, if I'm talking football wise, that's fantastic. Or if you're baseball wise, somebody that is familiar with pitching mechanics or certain, you know, certain aspects as far as you know, actual playing the sport. I think those things are huge. But you know, I like getting individuals that are different than me. That way, it pretty much informs me as far as educational standpoint. So, continuing education wise, I can just go and go into the next office rather than going to a conference or something, right? So, even though I still go to conferences, it is what it is. Now with social media, you can talk to anybody at any time, anywhere, and it's pretty cool. So, that was a huge thing. You know, and I just like, you know, I always had someone that you know, I got a chance to hire 5 individuals when I was at a FCS school as a director, and you know, one of my good friends, you know, he was probably the best programmer that I would ever know, except he didn't like confrontation, and he wasn't a good communicator. So I had those things down pat. I don't mind calling somebody out. I don't mind any of those things. So I said, hey, you're designing the program for X, Y, and Z. I'll design it for this over here. I'll control the floor. You stay behind and you be the guy that you know, pats everybody on the back and tells them to keep their head up, and then we're good to go. And then I hired some other individuals that were specialists around us. You know, I hired a rah rah guy, right? Because everybody needs a rah rah guy on staff. So that's not me. I'm not. You know, I don't do that stuff. So that's something a coach wanted. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, we'll find somebody that does that. And then I hired some other individuals that were really loyal and put time in and were eager and hunger, and they're from the same area that I was from. So I wanted to give them a shot, right? So and those people have moved on to other jobs and stuff, and that's fantastic. Um, but it's still, you still have those people that you go to when you have information or you have something that you want to bounce off someone's chest. You kind of have that group, that tight knit group of individuals that you go ask, right? So, which I think is needed in this profession because it is a very cutthroat profession. You know, your interns that you're teaching and mentoring right now will probably compete for jobs that you might want somewhere down the road, and vice versa. You know, your buddy that you've known for, you know, the last 10 years, you've seen at the NSA convention and shared a room with them or something like that. He may be going for the same job too. You know what I'm saying? So um, it is what it is. It's networking's huge, and just trying to get individuals to understand that is a huge part too. So
I have five-star points here. That was like unbelievably
I go
that
on
was
I go on
really,
rants
really good.
quite a bit, and they go
That's
all over the
okay.
place, so
No, that's okay. So I have so first and foremost, you talk about everyone having a specialty. Like
right.
that's one of the beauties of a strength and conditioning staff in professional baseball, especially in spring training, is our office is so small and we cram like 15 people in there, and we're just everybody has their own thing they're really good at, and it's like if I need to know something speed mechanics wise, all I have to do is look to my right. If I need to know something rehab wise, all I have to do is look to my left. And it's like having those people in your circle is so valuable to just if you can't go to a conference for whatever reason, it's like you're right here. Hey, what do you think about this? And then for me specifically, like they know the setting that we work in. So like the application aspect of those like, specialties they have within the context of our setting specifically versus a football setting, a college soccer setting, whatever is really valuable. The second one, you talk about like it's all about who you know. I am on the record saying that I hope I never have to pull my resume out again. And that like my work and my connections speak for me. And I think I would agree with you. Like anybody that says otherwise is probably naive, lying, trying to push an alternate agenda. But like if you get to the point in the field where there are so many people that speak highly of you and your work speaks highly for itself, like you're going to get a job somewhere, and it may not even require a resume. Like I agree wholeheartedly with you there. The next one I have put people into positions to succeed. Like we have a ton of like interns that come through. We have seasonal coaches that come through, and for me, I would agree with you. Like, I don't want to give them something so easy all the time, but there are times where like they need a day to succeed, and like being able to look at them and like, hey, maybe they're dragging a little bit today, or they look sad, or something's going on. Like putting them in an easy spot of like, hey, just run a killer dynamic today, and like, you tell the players like, hey, just give them the benefit of the doubt, like help them out, get through it, and then I've seen some of our younger staff like really thrive on like they ran a stretch on the AAA field, and like it's all adults on the AAA field, and these guys kind of go along with it and they're like, yeah, great stretch, nice job, well done. Like you put them in a position to succeed, and all of a sudden their chest pops up like this and they're walking around a little taller,
They're a little
you
bit more
know.
social. They start fitting in a little bit more.
Yes,
They start making
yes.
relationships. They're able to talk to people, and then boom, like it's a totally different person. So
So valuable, so valuable. The next one I had is the learning to coach and controlling the room, and you said like you think it's a lost art. For me, I think 100% young coaches now are so smart with technology and sports science, and then you put them in front of a room of athletes and they're just like deer in the headlights panic mode, and it's like the way I learned was I was deer in the headlights, but I got thrown into the fire, and it was like, run this group, go ahead, and you had to learn, and I think that's something that like you say, social media is really valuable, but also it takes away from some of that, like just connecting with people and just being real and having a personality in the real world versus like behind a screen. And I think some of the younger coaches really could learn from the older coaches on how to coach a room, how to work the flow of a room, how to command a room, and then older coaches can learn some of that tech stuff and the research and the things like that. And I think collaborating between the two is really valuable. And you talk earlier about like the guy you're working with being 20 years apart. My boss and I are exactly 20 years apart, and his son is 20 years younger than I am. So I keep telling him like, "Hey, you're my boss right now, but in 20 years I'm going to be your son's boss." So like we got to keep this relationship open, because when I'm, in my 50s, like I'm not going to know what's going on. I'm going to need to rely on your son to teach me. So like we got to get this work. But it's just like I think the coaching aspect really has gone by the wayside, and I don't know if that's because sports are pushing so hard for data and technology and things like that, that they see the opportunity to get in the job as like I need to learn this technology
right.
versus I need to work with the person in front of me. And then the last one I have, this is the most important one to me, is somebody had told me when I was younger, be the coach that you wish you had. And you talk about like when you were first in, you were standoffish, you were pushing people the
Right.
wrong way. And now like your athletes emulate you and they want to come and be around you. And like when guys, even at the highest level, when guys come in to hang out in the weight room just because they enjoy being around you, like it can be annoying sometimes in the sense of like you may have a small space and like, hey, I need to get work done. But at the same time, like they value you as a person and your conversation and your relationship more than they do the pitching coach or the manager or the chef on the kitchen staff. That's why they're hanging around you. Like take advantage of that, talk with them, ask them what you can help them with. Like
Yeah.
I've always tried to take that, and I've had great coaches along the way. I really have. And my first baseball coach in high school was the one that got me into lifting, and he was jacked, strong, tough, like hard nosed guy. He was a football guy, and he took me under his wing, and he's like, "This is how we train." And then all of a sudden, I'm walking around like him. I'm walking around with my chest puffed, and I'm buck 60. I'm skin and bones, and he's benching 405 for reps, and I'm like, I could be that guy someday. Like I want to be that guy. Like so for me, it was like be that coach that the younger you wanted to be or emulated, and like I'm glad that you hit on that because I think a lot of kids really do look up to their strength coaches as like superheroes. Like, you're a larger than life figure. You're teaching me these things. Like, and specifically for you, I've seen you train on your videos. Like, you're strong as shit. So like, they probably look at you and like, damn, this guy is killing it. Like, I want to lift like that guy someday. And then it's like he knows what he's talking about. He's gonna teach me the way. So for me, like those kids, it sounds like they're in good hands with you. It sounds like you guys have kind of a plan of development going forward and how you're going to progress the school. So it's really cool to get to talk with you, man, and I think we could probably talk for hours. I don't want to keep you all night,
Very
but
good.
is there anything else that we need to hit on before we close this one down?
Oh shoot. I mean, there's so much we could talk about it, but I think we hit everything. I think you know, like I said earlier, I think on the floor coaching is lost art. Like take advantage of it, try to learn, what works for you, what works for your athletes, put them in charge of things. I think that's huge too. Because the more that they have that control, I mean, the more they're going to feed into it. And another thing is get under the bar and train, experiment with different things, get in there, train as hard as you can for as long as you can, because eventually there's going to be the point that you can't train anymore, right? So experiment is huge. Different exercises, different aspects, and never, you know, I think YouTube and Instagram and all that stuff's fantastic. But a lot of those videos, don't believe the hype. If you see something that you find interesting, dig deeper on it, because some people may just put something on social media just for the fact of it looks cool rather than something that they actually use in their program, right? So just try to dig deep and visit as many people as you can. I mean, face-to-face connection is huge. It doesn't necessarily need to be a big Power Five program or a major league program or anything like that. It could just be, a small school down the road or a high school or anything. Anybody that's close to you. If you want to learn speed and mechanics, go visit a track coach. Don't dictate that just because they're a track coach they don't know anything about strength conditioning. I think that's one of the highest carryovers is track and field with strength training is huge. That's what all athleticism is based off of, and we can learn a lot from our track coaches. But just try to use the staff that you have and be all encompassing and be open minded, and I think that'll pretty much drive your program overall. So yeah, and have a plan. I think that's important too. When you come into a situation, if it's facility wise or human resource wise or staffing wise, have a plan to make it better because the kids you're working with, they may be coaches one day and pretty much they're watching everything you do, right? So try to make it the best situation you can for them so they can grow and you can, pretty much give to give the coaching profession by mentoring them and bringing them up in the right way. So that's huge.
I would say most high school athletes are probably more likely to be a coach someday than they are a professional athlete. So
100%. Yeah, I think so too.
good one to end on, John. I appreciate your open book,
Yeah.
and it's really been good to talk and kind of get to know you. And we'll definitely be catching up again soon, man.
Awesome. I'm excited. I appreciate you having me on here, and any way I can help you out, definitely reach out.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Got it.